All right, welcome back to our read aloud. I believe we were on chapter 8 of Where's Waldo. It's me again, Waldo, folks. Some very strange things happened at the airport this morning. A helicopter chopped down all the flagpoles. Just kidding. That's a good book, too. Oops. Okay, so the paired heirs. Everybody has their partner, and they take this pretty seriously because there's a lot of money at stake. Chapter 8. There's a blizzard at Sunset Towers. During the night, Flora Bomback's itsy bitsy snowflakes raged into a blizzard. This is in Minnesota. No, Wisconsin. Not Michigan, Wisconsin. Raged into a blizzard. The tenants of Sunset Towers awoke from clue-chasing, blood-dripping dreams, bound in twisted sheets, and imprisoned by 15-foot snowdrifts. No telephones, no electricity. Snowbound with a murderer. So they're all stuck inside too, just like us. The slow procession looked like some ancient, mysterious rite. As partners sought out partner on the windowless stairs, and silent pairs threaded through the corridors of the building in the flickering light of the crooked, colored-striped candles, the product of Turtle's stint at Summer's camp. She's such a little entrepreneur. She sells everybody candles. These are handmade candles, both practical and romantic, Turtle said, peddling her wares from her apartment door to frighten tenants at 7 a.m. Oh, it's only Turtle, people said. And the colored stripes tell time, which is very handy if your electric clock has stopped. Each stripe burns exactly 1/2 an hour, more or less. 12 stripes equals 6 hours. How much money? Not wishing to take advantage of this emergency, I've reduced the price to only $5 each. Outrageous, even more so when the electricity came on 2 hours after her last sale. Sorry, folks, no refunds, Turtle said. No matter, what was $5 to heirs of an estate worth $200 million? Clues. They had to work on those clues. Behind closed doors, psh, 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 whisper, someone may be listening. Not all the heirs were huddled in the plotting, puzzle-solving pairs. Jake Wexler had retreated to his office after a long and loud argument with his wife. He sure could have used half of that $10,000, but he wouldn't admit it, not to her. The forfeited money upset her more than the murder of her own uncle, if he even was her uncle. 5 floors above them, Jake's partner stood before the restaurant's front window, staring at the froth on the angry lake. So this would be Madame Who and beyond. No one had bothered to tell Madame Who about the Westing game. So I want you guys to watch how she's treated, because I think she's treated differently because she can't speak English. People kind of ignore her, don't include her, and she can't communicate with anybody because I don't know if Mr. Who speaks Chinese. He's American, Chinese American, but he communicates in English. Other players were snowbound elsewhere. Denton Deer in the hospital. Sandy was at home. No one gave a thought to where Otis Amber or Crow might be. But Seidel Pulaski was there, thumping her crutch against the baseboards as she limped through the carpeted hallways of the building on the arm of her pretty partner. Not one, but 7 tenants had invited her to morning coffee or afternoon tea. Murderer or not, they had to see Pulaski's copy of that will. 3 lumps of sugar, please. Angela takes it black. Your health? Oh, thank the Lord I'm still able to hobble about. Your job? I was a private secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages. Poor Mr. Schultz. I don't know how he'll manage without me. Your shorthand notes? Thank you for the refreshments. I must hurry back for my medication. Come on, Angela. So they all invited Seidel and Angela because she took notes on the will. One heir had not invited them in, but that didn't stop Seidel Pulaski from barging in the apartment of 2D. Hi, Chris. Just thought we'd pop in and see how you're doing. Don't be scared. I'm not the murderer. Angela's not the murderer, and we don't think you're the murderer. Mind if I sit down? The secretary toppled into a chair next to Chris before he could even reply. Here, I stole a macaroon cookie for you. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. I must have 6 strands of coconut between my upper molars. Chris took the cookie. Just look at that smile. It could break your heart. I want you to notice how people treat Chris differently, too. Angela wished her partner had not said that. It seemed so insensitive, so crude. But at least Seidel was talking to him, which is more than she was able to do. Angela, the fortunate one, standing there like a dummy. I know Denton wants to work on the clues with you. He's snowbound, too. You're very pretty. How did pretty come out? He meant to say nice. Chris bent his curly head over the geography book on his lap. She wasn't laughing at him. It was all right to ask her, because she was going to marry his partner. Rodgranez. Angela didn't understand. Chris fanned the pages of the book to a picture of a wheat field. Grands. Hold on a second. My Kindle keeps moving forward. Oh, grains. You want to know the name of some grains? Well, let's see. There's wheat, rye, corn, barley, oats. Otis. Angela thought the boy was going to go into a fit, but he was only repeating her last words. Oats. Seidel was puffing her warm breath on the window and wiping the frosty area clean with her sleeve. Now, there, you'll be able to watch the birds again. Anything else we can do for you, young man? Chris nodded. Read me your shorthand no notes. The pretty lady and the funny lady moved quickly out the door. So did they read anybody the notes? One limped, but it was a pretend limp, he could tell. Not like the limper who was on the Westinghouse lawn. Oats. Chris closed his eyes to picture the clue. 4 plain grain shed. Grain equals oats, Otis Amber. 4 plus D from shed equals Ford. But neither the delivery boy nor the judge limped. And he still hadn't figured out she or plain. He'd have to wait for Denton Deer. Denton Deer was smart. He was a doctor. Chris raised his binoculars to the cliff. Windblown drifts buttressed the house. Something moved on the second floor of the Westinghouse. A hand holding back the edge of a drape. Slowly, the heavy drape fell back against the window. The Westinghouse was snowbound too, and somebody was snowbound in it. Only one of the players thought the clues told how the $10,000 check was supposed to be spent. Take stock in America, the will said. Go for broke, the will said. In the stock market, Turtle said, and whoever makes the most money wins it all. And whole $200 million. Their clues. C, mountain, AM, O. Stood for the symbols of 3 corporations listed in the stock market. SEA, MT, and AMO. But AM and O are separate clues, said Flora. To confuse us, said Turtle. But what about the murderer? I thought we were supposed to find the name of the murderer. To put us off the track, if the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were all over everything in the Westinghouse, including the corpse. You don't really think one of us could have killed a living, breathing human being in cold blood, do you, Mrs. Bomback? Do you? Turtle did. Turtle did, but the dressmaker was a cream puff. Don't you look at me like that, Turtle Wexler. You know very well I could never think such a thing. I must have misunderstood you. Oh my, I just wish Miss Pulaski had shown us her copy of the will. Turtle returned to her calculations, multiplying numbers of shares times price, adding it to broker's commission, trying to total the sums to the $10,000 they had to spend. Flora Bomback may have been wrong about the murderer, but she was not convinced of Turtle's stock market plan. What about buy Westing Paper Products? I'm sure that was in the will. Great, Turtle exclaimed. We'll just do that. We'll add WPP, Westing Paper Products, to the list of stocks we're going to buy. Flora Bomback had watched enough television commercials to know that buy Westing Paper Products meant that as soon as she could go to the market, she'd buy all the Westing Paper Products on the shelf. Still, it felt good having a child around again. She'd play along with Turtle gladly. You know, Turtle, you may be right about putting our money in the stock market. I remember the will said, "May God thy gold refine." That must be from the Bible. It's Shakespeare, Turtle replied. All quotations were either from the Bible or Shakespeare. Mr. Who moved aside a full ashtray, so he smokes a lot. A full ashtray with a show of distaste, and he rearranged the clues. Purple, fruited, makes more sense. Grace Wexler looked across the restaurant to the lone figure at the window. Are you sure your wife doesn't understand English? I mean, after living here for so long? She's my second wife. She came over from Hong Kong 2 years ago. She does look young, but it's so hard to tell the ages of people from Asia, Grace said. Why was he glaring at her like that? Well, your wife is quite lovely, you know, so doll-like and inscrutable. Who bit off half a chocolate bar? He had enough problems with the empty restaurant, the lazy son, and a nagging ulcer. Now he had to put up with a racist partner. Grace lit another cigarette and rearranged the clues to read Purple Waves. Well, you heard that doorman say purple waves. It must mean something. And that ghastly secretary was wearing a dress with purple waves on it last night, not to mention her purple crutch. You should not speak unkindly of those less fortunate than you, Who said. Oh, well, you're quite right, Grace replied. I thought the poor thing handled her infirmity with great courage. Traveling mimosa, my future son-in-law says. He's a doctor, you know. Anyhow, Pulaski couldn't possibly be the murderer, not the way she gimps around. Besides, how could my Uncle Sam know she'd wear purple waves to his funeral? Who waved the cigarette smoke from his face? The murderer had to have a motive. How about this? A niece murders her rich uncle to inherit his money. Good sport that she was, Grace tossed back her head and uttered a fake, amused, ha 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 ha. Not that I care, Who said. That cheating old moneybags got what he deserved. What's the matter? Look, Grace pointed to the clues. Fruited purple waves for C. 4C. The murderer lives in apartment 4C. I live in 4C, Who barked. If Sam Westing wants to say 4C, he would have written the number 4 and the letter C. SEA means sea, like what a turtle swims in. Come on now, Mr. Who, we're both being silly. Haven't you spoken to your son about his clues? Some son, he said. If you can catch him, you can ask him. Who stuffed the rest of the candy bar into his mouth? And some business I've got here. Everybody orders up, nobody orders down. That coffee shop is sending me to the poorhouse. And your Angela and that Pulaski woman, they didn't even show us the will. They didn't even give us their clues. They didn't even pay for the 3 cups of jasmine tea and 6 almond cookies. And you smoke too much. Oh, I guess Grace is the one smoking. And you eat too much. Grace threw her coin purse on the table and stormed out of the restaurant. Change. That's all he'd get from her. He'd have to beg on his knees before she'd sign Grace Winsler Wexler to that $10,000 check. That madman. Some pair they made. Gracie Windlecopper Wexter, heir pretender, pretentious heir. First the money. They'd sign their names to the check. Half would go into Doug Who's savings account and half would go to Theo's parents. Oh, wait, who did I miss? Okay. Next pair. So Doug and Theo, the two teenagers. First the money. They'd sign their names to the check. Half would go into Doug's savings and half would go to Theo's parents. Next, the clues. His N on to the 4. Maybe they're numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Theo guessed. No, it says on, not no, the bored track star said. He clasped his hands behind his head, leaned back into the coffee shop booth, and stretched his long legs under the opposite bench. And no is what we got. No real clues, no leads, and no will. After 3 cups of coffee, 2 pastries, and a bowl of rice pudding with cream, Seidel Pulaski had offered nothing in return. Theo refused to give up. Are you sure you didn't see anything unusual at the Westing house that night? I didn't kill Westing, Theo, if that's what you mean. And the only unusual thing I saw was Turtle Wexler. I think that little pest is madly in love with me. How's that for luck? Get serious, Doug. One of the heirs is a murderer. We could all get killed. Just because someone zapped the old man doesn't mean he's going to kill again. Dad says... Doug paused. His father's comment about awarding a medal to the murderer might actually be incriminating. Theo tried another tact. Well, I was playing chess with somebody in the game room last night. Who? That's what's strange. I don't know who. We have to find out which of the heirs plays chess. Since when is chess playing evidence for murder? Well, it's something to go on, Theo replied. And another thing, the will said, no 2 sets of clues are alike. Maybe all the clues put together make one message, a message that points to the murderer. Somehow or another, we'll have to get the heirs together and pool all their clues. Oh, sure. The killer can't wait to hand over the clues that will hang him. Doug rose. Snowbound or not, he had to stay in shape for the track meet. For the rest of the day, he jogged through the hallways and up and down the stairs, scaring the nervous tenants out of their wits. Judge J.J. Ford had no doubt that the clues she shared with the doorman were meant for her. But Sam Westing could toss off sharper insults than, skies am shining brother. So that's J.J. Ford and Sandy's clues. His choice of words must have been limited. Therefore, these clues were part of a longer statement, a statement that had a name, the name of a murderer. No, Westing could have not been murdered. If his life had been threatened, if he'd been in danger of any kind, he would have insisted on police protection. He owned the police. He owned the whole town. Sam Westing was not the kind of guy to let himself get killed. Not unless he was insane. The judge opened the envelope given to her by the incompetent lawyer Plum. A certificate of sanity, dated last week. Having thoroughly examined, keen mind and memory, excellent physical condition, signed Sidney Sykes, MD. Sykes, who was that? That sounded familiar. The judge scanned the obituary she had cut out from Saturday's newspaper. So Sykes was the doctor who was in the car with Westing when Westing had his accident. After they lost the daughter, and then his wife left him, and then he had a bad accident, and then no one saw him ever again. So this is the newspaper. Samuel Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile accident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes resumed his Westingtown medical practice in the post of county coroner, but Westing disappeared from sight. Sykes was Westing's friend, and she remembered a witness to the will, but he was also a physician in good standing. She would accept his opinion on Westing's sanity, for the time being at least. Back to the clues. Look at her, big-time judge, fussing over scraps of Westing super-strength paper towels. Forget the clues, she said, rising from her desk and puttering about the room. Nibbling on a macaroon, she stacked the used coffee cups on a tray. If only that Pulaski person had let her study the will. That's where the real clues were buried, among the veiled threats and pompous promises, the slogans and silliness, in that hodgepodge of a will. In his will, Sam Westing had implied that he was murdered, and the murderer was one of the heirs, and that 3, he alone knew the name of the murderer, and 4, the name of the murderer was the answer to the game. The game. A tricky, divisive Westing game. No matter how much fear and suspicion he instilled in the players, Sam Westing knew that greed would keep them all playing the game until the murderer was captured and punished. Sam Westing was not murdered, she thought, but one of his heirs was guilty of some offense against Sam Westing, and that heir was in danger. From his grave, Westing would stalk his enemy, and through his heirs, he would wreak his revenge. Which heir, Judge J.J. Ford thought, which heir was the target of Westing's revenge? In the name of justice, she would find Westing's victim before the others did. She would have to learn everything she could about each one of the heirs. Who were they? How did their lives touch Westing? These 16 strangers whose only connection was living in Sunset Towers. Sunset Towers, she'd start there. Good, the telephones are working again. She dialed a number. Hi, this is a recording of yours truly, Barney Northrop. I'm at your service. Just as soon as I get back in my office, that is. Just sing out your problem to old Barney Northrop here. And when you hear the beep, beep. J.J. Ford hung up without singing her problem to old Barney Northrop. He, too, could be involved in Westing's plot. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop. It's a long chapter. And do you notice how the judge has a different motive? She wants to find who she thinks Westing's victim is, not the murderer of Westing. She doesn't think that Westing was murdered. But she does think he's a cunning game maker. Okay, great. I have to stop it. It's 22 minutes now. It's a long one.